When I first picked up my Interceptor 650, I loved the looks, but the one thing that I thought it needed straight away was chunkier rubber. Now, the easy option is just to put bigger tyres on there, but I went about this a different way, and here's why. It's probably not an issue to Interceptor 650 owners that the front and back wheel are both 18 inches, but for me, wanting to put something chunkier on both ends meant that created problems. 18-inch rear wheels generally are either classic styled bikes, which tend to be skinnier, or they're dual sport bikes which are a little bit knobbly, and I didn't want either of those. The tyre I wanted to fit was the Dunlop Mutant because I think it suits this bike really well. It looks a little bit like a wet, so it looks something like a flat track tyre, but it's going to work really well on the road. Dunlop don't make that in an 18-inch rear, so instead of messing around putting front tyres on the back and reverse them and all that rubbish, I made a decision to put a smaller rim on the back, convert the back wheel to a 17-inch. That gives me a whole host of tyres to choose from, and what it does is enable me to go a wider tyre and still retain that same overall diameter. Admittedly, this video is a little bit longer than I wanted it to be, if I'm being honest, because I've taken you through the process of removing the wheel, but that's only really a couple of minutes. The bulk of this video is down to the art of wheel building. I took my wheel to Chris Willis at Willis Wheels, and he is going to take you through the process of measuring up for a new rim, dismantling the original wheel, rebuilding the new wheel, and truing it. So all of that, I've tried to trim it down as much as I can, but there's so much detail that I don't want to leave out of that it is a little bit of a longer video. Having said that, I'll put chapters at the bottom so you can skip to the bits that you want to see. Once he's gone through that wheel build process, I'll get it back on the bike, I'll show you what it's like, and then I'll probably do a follow-up video instead of tagging it onto this, talking about how the tyres are performed in the new guys. So without further ado, and trying to make this video any longer than it already is, let's get straight on to the swap. So for the point of view of completeness, if you've never removed the rear wheel before, I'll just quickly take you through that process. You've got a 24mm nut on the right hand side which you'll need to undo, and to undo that you will also need to put a rod in the hole on the axle on the opposite side. Whip the nut and the washer off and put those to one side somewhere safe. Using a 12mm or two 12mm spanners, undo the locking nuts on the adjuster on the left hand side, followed by the same on the right hand side. Push the wheel forward to loosen up the chain, and that will allow it to be lifted off of the rear sprocket. Knock the axle through, and then supporting the weight of the wheel you can pull it out from the other side. It's at this point that you can now roll the wheel backwards out of the way, removing the brake caliper, and don't forget to take the spacers out of the center of those wheels. And to be safe, I always put the spacers onto the axle the way that they come off the wheels. That way you know which side to put on when you put them back together, and also you don't run the risk of losing them. So there you can see the difference in the wheels. There's the standard 130/80/18. This is the 150/70/17. A much wider tyre, but it will still go in. It's the same overall diameter as the original wheel, which means I don't have to mess around with any gearing or anything, and that also gives me a broader option, I think, of tyres running with a 17-inch rear wheel as opposed to an 18-inch rear wheel. And this can now go off to Chris at Willis Wheels so that he can weave his magic. So I'm here down at Willis Wheels in North Weald for the first part of the wheel build, and that is to get the rim punched with holes ready for the spokes in. So I've got the wheel off the back as you see me take that off. Chris is going to take some measurements, but we'll go through all the process of what he needs to do to make sure that the new rim is going to be ready to go. And so let's get inside and take a look. Okay, so then Chris, the wheel's in. What's the first thing you need to look at to establish the new build?
What we're going to do is punch a new rim. So I've got to work out how to punch the new rim so that we can put this hub straight into it. So there's a few things I've got to look for, which the first being the gauge of the spokes. So I've got a tool I've measured, I use for measuring, and we've got 8 gauge spokes. And the next thing to do is to check whether it's central. So the hub is even, top and bottom. It's the same spoke pattern, so the spokes this side will be the same that side, and it's all central, which is quite common with new modern bikes. This is relatively easy for us, but where we could go wrong on this, they're more or less straight spokes. They've got a very slight kink in them. So when they come down into here, we have to make sure we represent that the same. So the spokes at the minute, they come down like that and go into the holes. Okay. That's called standard punch. Now some bikes are reverse. So if we punched it reverse and then we went and put these spokes on, the spokes this side would go to the dimple, like the wrong side of where the hole is.
Okay, yep.
So it wouldn't work, then you've wasted a rim basically.
Okay.
Right, so that's the new rim. I've put it centrally onto the old rim. There's several ways we go about this. And I put the dimples in line with the spokes below. So no matter how big the rim gets, they'll always follow that same angle. So I need to follow the spoke angle from the dimple. So I'm going to mark across the rim. Then the next angle I'm going to go for, so that spoke is going to go in line with that. So it'll be punched at a bit of an angle. It's not going to the middle, it's going to where it wants to go to the side. So I'll show you in a minute how we get about that. I've now got to do the angle, how far does it come out? It's out to here, out to here. And with that, I'm going to measure the width of this rim against the width of this rim, and then measure the angle there in relation to the edge. So what I've done, that rule now is where the top of the rim is. That's 10mm above, it's sitting on the tyre, and goes central between that spoke and that spoke, which is going to give us our punch. That's 7mm over the length of spoke, which is say 6 inches. So that's the angle I've got from there to here. I've now got to measure the width of this rim. Right, so that width of that is 4 1/4 the outside of it. This one is 4 1/2 and it's wider, so we're going to go, I'm going to imperial measurements now, 1/8 wider each side. So now we're looking at minus, I don't know about 11mm, minus 11mm punch.
Okay, so Chris, new machine. What's this all about?
This one it's a hand punch. It's a fly press, and you can't buy all this mechanism because there's not enough people do it. So you work it out yourself. So we've got, this will be the roll of the rim, so we can move it along. There's numbers we've put on here. This is something we use on certain ones. It doesn't get used a lot, but it helps me work out the punch pattern for the other machine. So what I'm doing now, those marks I put in, so we've got that line I did across there and the line there, so I'm going to get that as upright as possible running through the machine. I can then put this onto the number which I want, which looks like about 5 1/2. 5 1/2 there, yep, I'm happy with that. That runs through the line, so if I punch, that will follow that same angle there. Now we've got to do the angle of the offset angle like that, which goes to the hub. So I'll put it on a dimple where we would be punching it. And now we were saying the length of the spoke is 6 inches. That's a spoke that's running up to the hub at the minute, so where it punches through from the rim, 6 inches is about here where I've got this marker pen. Okay, so that's, double check that measurement. And it wants to be minus 11mm. So that point, that is where it enters the hub, wants to be minus from across the edge here. Okay. So if I put 11mm on the centre of that, at that point, then I look down this edge, I need it to be level with the edge of the rim. It's nowhere near it at a minute, so just take the pressure off of that, pull it out a bit more. Right, let's try again. So level with the edge of the rim, so that's where that's going to go into your hub at that point. So I've got another number up here, so that number there, 10, 11, 12, 13, is 14 on my machine. So now I've found the punch pattern, and we're going to go across to another machine to punch it. Yeah, so this is a bigger version of the little machine we just looked at. Again, we've had to make all this, it represents the same as the other machine, a bit of power behind it. So I've set this the same 5 1/2 by 14, we spoke about the other machine. So that sits there, and what we're doing, we punch a hole that way, then I Move along one dimple from that side, it's across 2 dimples, and then roll that way. So that's giving you your crisscross of your spokes. At the end I turn around and do the other side, then we put a valve hole in it. If I do one of these wrong, that's the whole rim's in the bin. Right, that's that bit done. Yeah, the holes are all punched to the same angles that they are in that. Next thing is we're looking for the weld of the rims. The weld's here, run across, and we're going to drill the punch hole at the valve hole the opposite side. You don't be punching on material that's already been welded. We're roughly opposite the hole there. That's going to be where I'm going to be drilling through. And I'm making sure the spokes are going away from that. If we'd have put the hole in that bit, that spoke would cross over the valve hole, so you always make sure it's where you're going to be clear from it. Right. So we check a spoke out in the hole. You can see it's going, like we said there, fills up the hole nicely, nice and neat. And now the next job for this is to go to the anodizers.
So there you go, you can see what has gone into just prepping this rim. The holes have been punched, everything's been measured up, ready to go. This is now going to go off to be anodized. Once that's back, and this is a nice satin black to match the front wheel, I'll show you, or Chris will show you, what the process is to get this put onto the original hub. Then I can get it back on the bike with the new tyres and show you what it looks like. So I'm now back at Willis Wheels. I've collected the rim from the platers. It's been black satin anodized, so a big thank you to Frank Action Plating for a fantastic job and turning it around so quickly. I'll leave links to all these guys down in the description, but it's time now to get this in there and get the old wheel apart and this put back together. Obviously the first job is to disassemble the original rim, so that's a case of loosening each of the spokes, taking the nipple off the end and then feeding that out of the hub on both sides. That rim can go, and then the process can start to rebuild the wheel with the brand new rim.
It's always better to pre-make the spokes on a rim you haven't done before. So I've measured up and got the sizes I'm looking for. Start building it, and as this is an odd sort of number, it's not 40 hole, it's 36. I have to do 3 sets here and 3 sets the other side to get the lengths right. And if they're slightly too long, I can cut them down. If they're going to show the threads because they're slightly too short, I'll then throw them away and just start again. This is a thread rolling machine, so it swages the thread on there, makes it wider than what's needed. So these are on oscillators here. You can see this is like a cam. Each back part's a cam. It's opening and closing. That's just stop there at the length of the thread we need. So as it opens, it's spoken up to there. Let's just roll the thread on there. At this stage, by just partially building it, we can end up with the perfect build on the spoke lengths. That's all the higher ones done. I'll pop all the lower ones in, so it pops in there nicely. See, everything's pointing exactly where it should be going.
So with all the spokes in place, it was time to put the wheel in a jig and start the process of truing it. And to do this, Chris just put a little bit of attention in each of the spokes, so he had a starting point to work from.
Sometimes you're quite near with it, other times they're all over the place. It's generally about the weld on a wheel, how good the weld is. So I'll start on the edge there and then work on the inside. You can see there's a big gap there, small gap. So where the small gap is, I'll just tighten this side to pull that gap over a bit. As they're all only finger tight, there's movement in it at the minute like that. But if there isn't movement, when I start getting tighter, if I need to move it, I have to loosen this side, then tighten this side. It's all about the loosening and tightening. Some novices keep tightening and tightening, and you end up with thread stripping because they're going far too fierce on it. Loosen a few here. You might see me tightening up 10 spokes, and I've only briefly looked at it. You have a feel over the years for what you're building and how the wheel's sitting and how you want things to move over. So one spoke's not going to cut it. If I want to move this area over, I'll tighten 3 or 4 spokes up. Okay. If they're getting too tight, then I'd loosen the other side. So I'm trying to get an even spin on the wheel. I've got a white background with lines which I look at. So if you look at that now, you can see it's a lot straighter than what it was. It's not perfect yet, but you can see that's enhancing the up and down. You can see the up and down more now. You're getting it running more true. So I'm going to work on the up and down now. So each time's a high spot. You can hear that's touched the high spot there. So I want to tighten it up. You know, some people have a go at this and get the hang of it. Not too bad. Depends on what type of rim and how they're working with. Bear in mind, we do thousands and thousands of wheels, and it probably took, I would say personally myself, 100 to 200 wheels before I thought I'm getting quite good at doing it. That's sort of the level you're looking at before thinking about being a wheel builder. Still a low spot there I'm going to get rid of. Often the low spot is the weld, so once you get the wheel true, you'll see that there's always a dip in the weld because they weld it and they grind it down. So if you look at the wheel now, you can see it's getting quite close. There's a bit there that's tucking in on the left, that's the weld join, so I'll work with that more in a minute. I was going to nip up all the nipples, get them all to the same tension because it's quite close now. Not too bad there. Now what I'm going to do is check whether it's running central. Normally the spokes all being the same, if you see the spokes equally in the nipples, then you should be roughly not too far out. So I've got something to measure here. I'm going to measure down to the edge there, so that's 4.5 mil. And here we are 2 mil. So we need to bring the rim slightly this way. It's the next stage of doing that. Start at the valve hole again. I'll turn the wheel around for this. I'm right-handed, it's just quicker to do this. And this side I'm going to loosen them all 2 turns, or what I say 2 turns, actually half a turn. It's me going twice on the spanner. And I'll just be repeating these sequences again in a minute until I feel I'm happy with it, and then go do a final tension check on every nipple right at the very end. Running roughly true still, roughly there. Remeasure. So now our gap now is 3 mil and 3 mil. That's it, so we're running through. Right, next thing I said was settling the spokes. So we use a drift, and I'll do the inside spokes first. And the outer spokes, just tapping them. And then where they cross over. So now I'm on the inside of the rim where the tyre would sit, and as it runs round you hear it touching on the weld there. You don't need a lot of movement sometimes to get it right. So it's not actually touching that now. That's it.
Perfect.
Well done, Tony. So that weren't too terrible, was it?
So there you go. I hope you found that interesting. There's certainly a lot more to it than I first imagined, and it is a real art form, and it takes years of experience to be able to do what Chris and John do here at Willis Wheels. But this is now done. It's all ready, laced up, trued, everything's ready to go. So I'm going to get this off to the tyre fitter. We'll get new rim tape on it, tube in, tyre on. I'll get that back on the bike. then I can put the new tyre on the front and you'll be able to see what a transformation this makes. So a big thank you goes out to Chris, John and Emma for spending the time to do this and let me take you through that process. They do have open days here every now and again. If they get one and you're in the area of North Weald, definitely worth coming down and have a look around, and there's always going to be some interesting bikes here. Refitting the wheel is just a reverse process. Push the wheel into place, put the spacer in, line up the axle holes, knock the axle through. Once that's through, you can then put the chain back on the sprocket, loosely tighten the axle bolt, get the dots on the swing arm to the same reference point as they were before. Once they're lined up on both sides, you can do up the adjusters. And there you have it. There's that new 17-inch rear rim with the 150/70/17 Mutant tyre on there. I think that looks fantastic. Much fatter in the rim, still plenty of clearance, nowhere near the chain, and it just fills that back end up nicely. And I've gone for a 110/80 on the front as opposed to a 190, which is the original, but stuck with the 18-inch rim. I'll leave all the links to everything down in the description down below. Thanks for bearing with this video. It has been a bit long, but as I said, I needed to squeeze everything in. If you've got any questions, just let me know in the comment section down below. And all that leaves me to say is until next time, thanks for watching, take care, ride safe, and I'll see you soon. Bye.